Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Awesome update here regarding Bitcoin, breaking its descending trend line, showing a lot of strength, expecting a short-term continuation lower, and we're going to take a look at some polls here, of course, to kind of see what your thoughts are on Bitcoin and kind of where we're going out there. But for the most part, we're looking at this double bottom invalidation, potential bounce off this 108.5K range. We held above that like a champ. And then, of course, some nice bullish convergences here with a bullish engulfing candle on the 3-day time frame. However, we still got some mitigating factors here with CME gaps and potential divergences based on overextension, key level resistance at 111 to 112,000 for Bitcoin, and of course, all the stablecoin stuff we need to know about. So be sure to stick around. Important one here today. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back end juicy liquidation data here, of course, I'd just like to touch on some fundamentals as well as some polls here, of course, just kind of getting a baseline of what your thoughts are here. First of all, before we jump into the news, we want to just double check here. Is Bitcoin breakout trustworthy? I asked if that is the case. 80% of you so far after 15 votes feel like we're going to probably go down. I agree with that sentiment. Same thing as well here for YouTube. Roughly 57% of you are bearish, if you will. And once more, this question is kind of open-ended, right? Are we going to go down? Are we going to go up? Obviously, it's one of the two directions, but how far up or down are we going to go? That's the question. We're going to answer that here today. Specific key levels of support and resistance for Bitcoin that will influence altcoins too. Looking at Bitcoin and altcoins, speaking of which, this is just kind of some key fundamental impacts here for the week based on crypto macroeconomics. So simple way to understand is we got 10% of the S&P 500 companies reporting earnings this week. That's generally a big deal. That'll be happening throughout the week, of course, and those will factor in. Crude oil inventory data, that's not super important, but it is relevant to the larger picture. But as far as the direct impacts, we're seeing CPI data inflation this week and October PMI, of course, rolling out. Those are coming out Thursday, Friday, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, the summary here is basically just letting us know that the Federal Reserve decision this week with weak CPI, lackluster home sales, sluggish PMI, that could incentivize historically the price to go up if we see possibility for rate cuts. But obviously, there's a lot of factors involved too. There's another thing too that we can't understand or know specifically when it's going to happen. The federal government's going to reopen too at some point, right? So we're going to see a reopen or a reverse of that government shutdown. So that's kind of the concept there. Anyways, quick favor, if you could, hit the like button. Maybe even comment below. Let me know what are your thoughts on this coin that we're covering here today, Bitcoin and others. But more importantly, too, just are you bullish or bearish right now? Like, does this continuation to break our descending trend line feel legit or trustworthy? I'm a little gun shy here. I don't think we're in great shape just yet, but it is a pretty good break with some decent volume. Taking a look here, speaking of volume, we can see there's more liquidation above the price. Sorry, this is not liquidation. This is order blocks here. There's more sell orders than buy orders above the price versus below. So we got a slightly larger delta there, just kind of letting us know for the moment we're seeing that resistance at 112,000 holding pretty well. Speaking of double top here, or talking about this just kind of from a macro structure to give you some perspective, we can see we closed over 108,500 this week here, which is very good. Okay, so overall, it's a good sign. Generally speaking, we've held this level very well, right? So 108.5, 108.4, just approximately, you can even round up and say 109,000. Closing above 109K is a big deal, and that's essentially what we did this weekend. So it's a good sign. So last week closed more so positively. I wouldn't say it's great to see that kind of a bearish candle, but it is good to see not closing below that previous high range too. And if you're not familiar, that was our high there for Bitcoin back in January, the all-time high, effectively letting us know that that $110,000 resistance level needed to be broken, but before it got broken, it needed to be retested multiple times. So that's kind of the concept there. Same thing here as well. We need to retest this support level multiple times before it breaks to the downside. That's kind of what that's showing us. So that is a good sign in the overall sense. We've also got a bullish engulfing candle here on the 3-day time frame, just kind of letting us know that if we do close over that 111K range, which is the tentative resistance for us for the moment, then we should see potential continuation higher. Just bear in mind there's more moving averages above the price. There's a decent chance we do continue a bit lower, or at least retest the local bottom of that 107K range. I'll explain more so about that here in a minute. When it comes to CME gaps, though, on the far left-hand side, this is Bitcoin, just kind of letting us know there's still a CME gap as low as 107.3. And then for Ethereum, roughly 38.75 is that lower CME gap. Now, they're partially filled, so there's potential we don't see that completely filled, but I think the likelihood is still quite high, considering we pumped on a weekend, right? Weekend pumps, low volume. Generally speaking, we're not going to see a significant continuation after that. But once more, yeah, stranger things can happen. This is a weird market, folks. It's not behaving the way that it should. As weird as it sounds. Honestly, after analyzing traditional and crypto markets for over 20 years, I can tell you that something feels off about this. But once more, you never truly know. So concept here is that Ethereum dominance is increasing. So just kind of give you some perspective, this is a positive sign here, letting us know that money's not flowing into Bitcoin. It's more so flowing into altcoins, as we can see here. Okay, so money's flowing away from stable and generally going into Ethereum and altcoins, where obviously Bitcoin's increasing, don't get me wrong, but that's why we're seeing mostly a 1-to-1 ratio for altcoins. And what we can do is I'll make a separate video on Bitcoin dominance and how to interpret that. But generally speaking, when Bitcoin dominance goes up, that's usually bad for altcoins, but it's going sideways right now. That's generally favorable, implying that altcoins could pump here soon if we start to see that decrease in Bitcoin dominance and money flows into altcoins. So looking at the liquidation heat map, this is the last 30 days, just kind of give you some perspective. There are some pretty big gaps here, or not gaps, but pretty big numbers. 113.5 is kind of that largest one there, but down below, 109.5. I talked about that yesterday, being a significant area of liquidation. So my guess is we're going to see the 109K range retested in the relative near future, just because we're starting to lose strength in this current range. Now, when we look at the local timeframes, we can kind of see here, pretty straightforward. Actually, no, let's get a refresh here. This is a little bit old. Let's double check this. We can see 112.3 is that upper area of liquidation, so we could see a push towards the 112K range or 110,000 even. So 110 or 112.3. All right, those are kind of like the local areas of liquidation. Now we look here. This isn't super telling. I glanced at this before I started recording, and generally we're seeing a 1-to-1 ratio for most altcoins, but Bitcoin's seeing a significant imbalance here with more shorts than longs liquidated. So it basically implies a lot of a lot of shorts got hit there. They're going to be flipping to longs as you continue to take these late longs at 111,000. The propensity for the price to go back down is higher, based on the simple fact that what goes up must come down. We are also overextended on the 9-hour, or sorry, the 9. We're seeing a 9 on TD sequential for most altcoins and Bitcoin here today. That's both on the hourly and the 4-hour. So those are usually overextensions that reverse themselves short term. All right. So when I talk about the price pulling back, I'm not saying we're going to go to 100,000 or 90,000 or something ridiculous. I think it's more realistic to presume that our local high will work as a new low. And that's that 107K range. We'll talk about that here in a minute. That's also confluent with the open interest ranges, but more specifically, the CME gaps below the price. So it seems like that's an obvious area to consider securing profits or considering a long. Right now, though, fear is still heavy. Therefore, the price is going up. This is standard rinse and repeat for market makers. They're buying the fear, and they're going to sell the greed. So as that starts to shift, just say we get to 115, 118, 120K, we're going to probably see some selling pressure. That's kind of par for the course, but just kind of giving you the understanding that it's really common for us to see pullbacks based on that, based on those overextensions. And just to touch on this before we jump into the back end, we're at an 8 on TD sequential here in the 4-hour. That means we've been running for 32 hours straight, including a weekend continuation, by the way, for the last trading cycle here. So the concept here is that when you see a significant imbalance, a continuation too high in one direction, then the likelihood or propensity for further downside is higher. And right now, Bitcoin is going up, and most altcoins are pulling back on the short term. I know that because we have a short position open with Chainlink at $19, and that's actually gone down versus Bitcoin going down, where the short at 111,000 is essentially in the red. So there's some interesting imbalances here, and we're going to talk about that. Let's jump into the back end here, quickly understand some general stuff here, right? So liquidation, there's liquidation below the price. That's not really anything to worry too much about. I don't care about this chart too much. It doesn't tell us a lot. This tells us that the average top trader, basically these are large market positions, they're effectively taking more shorts. So we're seeing that the amount of shorts increasing as the price goes up. That's common, par for the course, but with that increasing and the amount of margin tapering off, that tells me there's weakness here, but also more interest in shorting the coins, right? And more specifically, I'm presuming it's basically Bitcoin. That's those are mostly what that refers to. Now, when we look at the open interest ranges, there's a lot of open interest between now and 115. So As I talked previously, that 115.5K range, that macro point of control lower range, that's kind of the lower range there, that we're likely to see that reject initially. In other words, if the price continues higher, we're looking at 115,000 as that initial resistance based on not just local highs, but also this open interest range. Okay. Now these work as magnets a lot of times because there are liquidation events that occur right there. So just keep that in mind. But that's the general concept here. We can see that basically the case here for Bitcoin, 115,000 is that area of potential resistance. Now, when we look at liquidation delta, this has shifted bullish, which is generally a favorable sign. So this does imply that taking a short position right now may not be the smartest call, but it's still considered to be a high risk in my personal opinion if you were to take a long right now too. So longing into resistance doesn't make a ton of sense just because we've broken a short-term descending trend line. So those are my thoughts there. Let's quickly note too here as well. Let's see an alert just came through here for our premium signals. We did secure profits 21% on our Chainlink short there, roughly taken 2 hours ago. And clarify too as well, Solana did hit our profit target from 3 days ago, 45% and 42% for our ARB long as well. So we've got basically longs from earlier prior to the weekend, and now we've got shorts essentially that are coming into play based on just this weekend overextension, right? So there's different ways you can play the market, but honestly, right now, no matter how you look at it, and you've probably seen this in my trade alerts, because once more, I send out a trade alert for every single trade that I take, right? So I explained why we took our Chainlink short. Okay. The key takeaway here is that when you're reading through these, you need to understand that invalidation levels are very important to pay attention to, as well as the simple fact that we're seeing a short-term pullback for Bitcoin and that significant overextension on the link. So some coins are, they're going to carry higher risk than other coins. And majority of the coins I've been taking trades with lately have been considered higher risk trades just based on the way that the market has been moving. It's just such a difficult market to gauge. So please understand tighter margins is probably the better way to go when you're trading. Especially if you follow my signals, make sure you secure profits when you can. I definitely recommend taking almost all profit at target one. Don't hold on to the metaphorical moon. It's just we're not in that kind of market to do that. Anyways, this is kind of a zoom in here for Bitcoin. We already talked about the overextension. That overextension leading into this point of control here to 111,000 leads me to believe that we are likely to reject at this area. Okay, so if you kind of see here, you can identify there's a lot of volume right here. We have some previous macro confluence there as well, kind of letting us know that this is an area of consideration or retracement. So in other words, the likelihood of further downside from here is greater. I'm not proposing we're going to go super low, but it would make sense to hit our local high, which is right here at about 107,000, and or the lower shelf there on that CME gap that's still remaining. So those are kind of the places that I would like to consider a long generally at this point. That would also put us in a position where we'd see a bullish back test of that descending trend line, and oftentimes that's right where you want to get in. So still a little early, of course. We're going to ride out our short for a little bit longer, kind of see where we're at, but for the moment, this is the concept here for Bitcoin. It's tentatively bullish, and I want to emphasize the word tentative. Don't get super crazy and just take a bunch of longs right now. It's expecting a short-term correction is great. If the price continues to pump, okay, cool, no big deal. We'll either catch a short at a higher level and or consider a long at a slightly lower level once it does pull back. But I think FOMOing in right now is just generally a bad idea based on these divergences we see. The price action, even though it looks very nice, trust me on this, it looks nice from a bumper sticker. It's just not all that great when you dig a little deeper. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What are yours? I hope you were able to be successful regardless. Let's take a look at some altcoins. Quick heads up to our traders, make sure you take full advantage of this Uptober sale here, or rephrased to as our Dumptober sale. Sale ends October 31st. Just want to make sure you're aware there's only a few slots left remaining for our permanent access, and there's also monthly options as well. Crypto Cash Premium, day trades, swing trades, and trade setups are all included here, and those are provided to you through Telegram or Discord. Feel free to message me below if you have any questions, of course, but I do recommend you direct message me before so we can make sure that you have any questions, we field that together. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at Ethereum. Let's start with a comparison and then kind of go from there, jump into the backend data, because I think it helps to get kind of like an understanding of how well these coins are paired, or inversely paired rather, right? Because when we saw the liquidation for Ethereum, it was a 1-to-1 ratio, but if we look here, this does not look like a 1-to-1 ratio, does it? Bitcoin's going sideways between 110.5 and 111.5, and we're seeing Ethereum pretty much dump city. Now, most altcoins are responding like this. This is exactly why I urged caution to my community earlier today and throughout the weekend to be very careful taking longs and try not to FOMO into the top here, because all Bitcoin has to do is pull back by a little bit and we see this large correction. So let's see if we can identify some key levels here for these altcoins and just help understand where we're at here in the situation. So open interest is kind of a little bit on the sparse side. We see a lot of different areas here. Let's actually zoom in a little bit so we can get better perspective. Let's look at the last 3 days and see if there's any support ranges specifically. So 3920 to 3900, there's a potential pivot point there that makes sense because there's a local high in that range. So 3900 is a round number, is a potential logical consideration for a long, but once more, it's not that easy, right? And I'll explain more so what I mean by that. But liquidation delta is bullish, so generally speaking, these pullbacks are worth investing in. You just got to kind of get ready and be ready for, or be okay with, the price precipitating down a lot further and faster than Bitcoin. That's kind of what we're seeing right now. Now on the left-hand side, if we look at the last 3 days, we can recognize some important stuff here. First of all, just kind of zooming in from the weekend liquidation, there is a chunk of liquidation at 3,900 and 3,800 to 3,700 respectively. So pretty much every $100 for Ethereum, we're seeing significant chunks of liquidation. So 3,900, once again, just kind of reinforcing that potential support there, or a bounce off that level if we sweep that liquidation based on open interest. Now, if we look at the charts here, we can recognize that we broke free from our wedge type of pattern, or depending on how you look at it, it's kind of a macro structure here, but we kind of worked ourselves into a wedge. Now that we've broken that, doesn't mean we go straight up from here. Short answer is yes, we should go up, but long answer is no, because there's a lot of caveats here. First of all, Bitcoin potential of pulling back and how poorly Ethereum is paired with Bitcoin right now leads me to believe we're probably going to pull back to our local high, which once again is this lower range here of 3,900. Okay, that's basically the local high for Ethereum prior to breaking out over the weekend. All right, now I try to teach this to everyone too. Don't trust weekend breakouts. And the situation here, we can see the weekend breakout did occur, but we're seeing profit being taken now as well. Okay, so all that being said, it's best to prepare for further downside, but I think overall, this macro structure, breaking this descending trend line, is very positive. I just don't love or relish the idea of trying to take a long right now based on the way things are looking. Okay, I would much rather wait for a little bit more of a pullback, because we're only about 8 hours into this 36-hour continuation, and it makes more sense to wait for the price to kind of start to bottom out in that lower range. So I'm going to be more apt to wanting to take a long in the 3,900 to 3,920 range than I am right now. That's just kind of my thoughts based on the premise that Bitcoin is going to pull back. Now, that's not a guarantee. It's just a statistical probability. That's all there is to it. Okay, and that's how I like to trade. Anyways, I hope that makes sense. Let's take a look at the next one. If you're looking for a new exchange, or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, jumping into Solana's chart here, let's double check a few important things. And Solana is looking quite interesting here at this point when it comes to this descending trend. We are bullishly backtesting it, but that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. And I need to kind of reinforce and reiterate, some folks put a lot of emphasis on moving averages. Larger timeframes are kind of like just support and resistance ranges. So please note that yes, we're above the 20-day SMA and below the 50. It's important to just not get too ridiculous and think that that's just going to bounce immediately because of it. Okay, so I like to reinforce that. Sometimes folks kind of seem to misunderstand that. But when it comes to open interest, let's quickly note 198 obviously is that area of open interest. And just to quickly clarify too, if you saw my video from yesterday, I mentioned that 195 is still a good profit target for us. So if you take a look here, you can see 195 here for Solana. We hit that target exactly at 195 before the price pulled back. Okay, so I'm only highlighting that and showing that to you because you need to understand that working within these tighter margins is more beneficial nowadays. And you want to ensure that you are just being very careful with the trades that you're taking and not getting too lofty, right? Keep your trades tighter. You're going to find more profit that way, and you're going to be a little bit more successful. Obviously, you're not going to be a moon boy, and you can't brag about 1,000% return on your portfolio. But that's not what trading is all about. Trading is about sustainability and not being an emotional idiot. And people that post their results consistently, they're a little bit more on the emotional side because they feed off of that response from others. Not to say it's good or bad. I'm just saying that if you do it incorrectly, it's probably not the best strategy. Okay, so just jumping in the backend data here for Solana, just kind of clarifying, we can see liquidation deltas above and below the center line. So generally speaking, that doesn't imply a lot of strength. It shows that the price is more likely to pull back because it can't seem to reclaim that bullish behavior. Same thing as well with liquidation. There isn't a lot left here. When we looked at the price action yesterday with a 3-day time frame, 195 was that upper shelf, and it looks like majority of that has been swept. There's that 195 there with some new late shorts at 196. Okay, so once more, that doesn't give me a vote of confidence to want to try to take along with this coin. All that being said, though, we're not massively overextended, and this coin actually does show good slow continuation. Okay, now looking at the macro structure, just to clarify, we're still well below our descending trend. And if you draw out our macro fibs, it's pretty straightforward too. We are coming up to that 0.236 fib level, and we're far away from any areas of confluence. Specifically, 203 is that center line, that baseline for us, right? So we need to be mindful that that is going to be a resistance, and then all the more reason why you secure profits on along between now and that level, right? Try not to get super greedy, at least until we break that range. And Bitcoin's at like 115 or higher. Honestly, we need to see other factors here letting us know that we're in good shape. Right now, this is still very premature. We do have a stochastic swing to the upside, a secondary one on this heavy pullback. So it does lead me to believe that there's more strength in this continuation, but it's once again a momentum play. You don't necessarily trade on momentum when it comes to crypto. So the summary here is that Solana is breaking moderately bullish, but it still has early signs of reversal and not a significantly strong pairing with Bitcoin. So it leads me to believe that it's not necessarily the best investment for the moment, and that we are probably more likely to pull back a little bit further before the price continues higher. And how low are we going to go, you might ask? Well, that's really hard to say because there's not a definitive line here, but the last overextension line is roughly 187. So that may be the new bottom for us, but I think it's difficult to gauge right now. And folks, I got to tell you, like, when you're having difficulty figuring out which direction something's going to go, you just don't trade it. That's the really easy way to understand it. So boom, you heard it right now. Solana is untradeable. All right, let's take a quick look here at SUI and double check some important stuff. We saw a pretty significant pump here, right? So contrary to majority of other coins, we saw SUI really take off and rip when Bitcoin moved as well. So that's a good sign that shows it has strength with Bitcoin, potentially even a stronger continuation potential. So let's look at the backend data here for SUI, and if there's anything kind of telling us here. Now, I've mentioned this previously, 270 is that macro and local point of control. 270 was that previous high. That has to be working as probably a new resistance for us. So I want you to understand and get it through your head that 270 is probably going to provide some resistance. It kind of already has because we wicked up to 267 and pulled back from there. But I want to clarify here, 255 and 260 are really heavy areas of open interest below the price. That does tell us that we're probably in pretty good shape for continuation higher here if the price were to continue for Bitcoin. Now, liquidation deltas in the green, that's awesome stuff. And we do see more liquidation above the price than below the price, specifically closer to this $3 level. So while 270 could be the immediate top, if we break through that level, a run towards 280 to $3 makes a lot more sense. And I think that SUI is looking pretty strong. Now let's quickly do a little comparison here because I'm kind of curious. It is looking very similar to Ethereum. Look at the Ethereum and SUI charts. They're looking very similar. So that doesn't give me a lot of confidence here, letting us know that SUI won't pull back. I mean, look at these candle wicks, folks. Like Bitcoin, yes, pulled back a little bit here, but we saw a significant correction for SUI, but also a significant correction to the upside, right, with Bitcoin. So that tells us a lot in the sense that this coin's highly volatile and that having tighter stop losses and or liquidation events is a bad idea. So the concept here, I would say, is that lower leverage makes more sense so you don't get wicked out all the time. That's kind of the idea. But it's never exactly the way that it works, right? So take a look at the macro structure, 245 as discussed previously, somewhat of a double bottom. I'm not proposing we're just going to go straight up from here, but we did bottom out pretty well at the local, the macro bottom here. And that leads me to believe that 245 is at the bottom. Okay, so if we do end up getting lucky and seeing 245 again, that seems like a good consideration for a higher risk long with low leverage, possibly even a low margin trade there. Okay, but generally speaking, the daily time frame is still pretty ugly and choppy for this coin. Same thing with a 4-hour time frame too. It's very similar to other coins that I don't really feel all that confident trading right now. So the better case scenario is to wait for either 245 to 250 to be retested. That is this local support range here, basically right in this range where we had our higher highs. Or basically our local high at 250 and a potential macro low of 245. So averaging into 245 to 250 might be a decent consideration. So what I'd be hoping for to happen is to see Bitcoin at 107 to 108K in the next 24 to 48 hours, and SUI to be consolidating between 245 and 250. That would be a better case scenario for taking along. I would not want to take along with SUI at 245 to 250 if Bitcoin is still hanging out at the 111K range or potentially even lower. That would show like very poor coupling with Bitcoin. And those are things you really want to trade into. So at this point, SUI is it's a coin flip right now. Not necessarily the best trade. Quick heads up to our traders, make sure you take full advantage of our Dumptober sale going on until the end of the month. We have a few slots left remaining. Our most popular feature here is our permanent access. Make sure you take advantage of this, of course, if you want monthly subscriptions as well. That's also a good feature for you. But the main concept here is that you're provided with swing trades, day trades, and my trade setups to let you know specifically why I take the trades that I take in the first place. Everything is explained, as well as a trading university too. Be sure to check it out. If you have any questions, comment below, or more importantly, just reach out to me direct with the contact information in the comments. All right, folks, let's jump on into the XRP chart. And XRP is looking a lot more bullish than the majority of these other coins are, but it is reaching an overextended state. So let's not get too crazy ahead of ourselves. We're also in this macro, no, sorry, not a macro. This is more so the local descending trend line. We can see we're at that 0.65, 0.68 golden pocket too. So I think a reversal, short-term reversal for XRP, just like I'm expecting for Bitcoin as well, makes a lot more sense at this point. So taking a look here, we can see 239 to 237 is that area of open interest for XRP. So if you're going to consider shorting, don't get too crazy. I wouldn't consider going to the ground floor with this one. I think the local highs makes more sense for a take profit target. It's going to want to be a tight margin though. Okay. So don't get too crazy. Having said that, it doesn't necessarily mean that shorts are a good call or a good play either. We have a lot of liquidation to the upside, 200 million in the green, and there's more liquidation above the price between 255 and 260. So just looking at liquidation alone without looking at the charts, I would say that if we're lucky to see a 240 to 235 entry, that would be an awesome consideration for a long to the 250 to 260 range. Okay. Once more, just some incentive for the back end that kind of lets us know that we're more likely to go higher. But once more, speaking to this short-term trend and just the overextension here, we previously hit a 7 on TDS. Basically, we had 28 hours of continuation to the upside, and now we're at 36 hours of continuation with a little bit of consolidation, right? So that leads me to believe that the likelihood of the propensity for pulling back is higher. How low is it going to go? Probably only 240 to 240 to 245, right? Kind of like, or no, I misspoke. 235 to 240. That's that range of open interest that we identified on the back end data. So all that being said, short-term reversal for XRP, but I would say that there's better structures here, both on the back-end data and also the 4-hour time frame, kind of letting us know that we're more likely to go higher than lower. Now, the daily time frame also shows some strength, but in subtle ways. In other words, we're seeing the RSI kind of continue higher. We're seeing a secondary swing to a secondary stochastic swing. And if you notice, you can see lower highs and lower lows in the chart, but you can also see higher lows and higher highs on the stochastic. Usually that's a good sign. So I think the macro structure for this coin makes more sense to go higher. I just don't really want to FOMO into a 245 entry when I feel Bitcoin's going to pull back. So once more, 235 to 240 is kind of my desired entry consideration for this coin. You do got to recognize, though, there are some macro resistances above us. 255 and 275 are the two big ones. So that's a big one there from previous timeframes. And we also have our, like triple bottom, basically, where we could not pass 275. And eventually, once we did, obviously, it kind of chunked down. But for the most part, we're going to expect some resistance when we enter this 270 to 275 range. So I'd be very, very careful taking along to, $3 or higher. You want to secure profits between 255 and 275. That's going to be a likely next range for us. Okay, so those are just my thoughts there. What are yours? Comment below. Thanks again for being an awesome part of my life. Don't forget to like the video. We'll see you in the next one. Take care again. Bye-bye.